Have you ever lied? Have you ever lied to get something you wanted? Have you ever agreed with someone else to lie and work together to achieve a common goal at the expense of others? Now, I don't know about you, but I have. For example, me and the boys, aka the boys and I, used to sneak into the neighbor's garden for some apples. Fuji, Gala, Honey Crisp, all day. Them shit's mad delicious. But Bobby, what's with the questions? Well, if like me, you answered yes to the last question, then both you and I are guilty of participating in a conspiracy. A conspiracy is, by definition, two or more parties entering into an agreement to deceive, mislead, or defraud others of their legal rights or to gain an unfair advantage. Sure, the boys and I only stole a couple apples, no big deal, no one's gonna break your fucking fingers for that. And for you, it's maybe that you helped out a friend by keeping a secret from their girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend's boyfriend, whatever. But it's still a conspiracy, by definition. And that's what this video is about. Conspiracies. More importantly, the difference between conspiracies and conspiracy theories. And yes, there's a goddamn difference. Because as we all know, in the year of our Lord 2022, one of the worst labels you can earn yourself is the label of conspiracy theorist. And while there are many truly crazy conspiracy theories out there, I am beginning to feel that many people don't know the difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy. And let me tell you, that just fucking Hemmings my way. Kurt's my Cobain, if you will. Let me explain. Okay, let's start with the obvious. Some conspiracy theories are way out there. Too crazy for any reasonable person to believe, because either they require a huge leap of faith or the evidence against them is just too strong. And when I say leap of faith, I mean unbuckle your seatbelt, Fight Club, close your eyes, let Jesus take the wheel, Susan Sarandon off the cliff kind of shit. The Earth is most likely neither shaped like a frisbee nor is it hollow. A theory even less likely than the Earth being hollow is that it's hollow and home to Nazi battalions waiting for the right moment to, I don't know, bring sexy back. The moon, in all likelihood, is not a projection. To believe that the Bigfoot is real and living an elusive lifestyle somewhere in the wilderness, homesteading and doing a nature vlog, while difficult to disprove with certainty, requires a massive leap of faith. The kind of leap of faith that most reasonable people won't take, and for a very good reason. Now, I could keep listing crazy conspiracy theories for a while here, but I won't, because that kind of illustrates my first point. The main reason why it's so difficult to remain objective with conspiracy theories is the sheer amount of theories out there. Which of these are false? Which are true? Which are somewhere in between? Try as you might, you will never know all the facts on even a single theory, and there's always more theories. And unless you're like next level zen the fuck out and you try to pay attention to this stuff and talk about it, your friends and family will most likely perceive you as an unhinged maniac sitting in your mom's basement coming up with this shit as you meticulously read through the entire bibliography of L. Ron Hubbard and David Icke. The opposition to the idea that conspiracy theories are something worth paying attention to is almost entirely rational. God forbid you try to wrap your head around every theory out there, you would, I fucking assure you, go crazy. But notice I said the opposition is almost entirely rational. If you spent any amount of time on the internet, and at some point ventured outside the Cartoon Network website, fuck, you remember when you were a kid, and the first time you went over to your buddy's house and he had that dial-up connection, that World Wide Web hitter, and you were too young and innocent to know that deep throat porn and beheading videos existed? The first thought you had was to go on the Cartoon Network website because you'd seen the ad like 500 times while you were lounging around watching KND, waiting for your parents to come home and give you shit about not cleaning your room, and you're never gonna amount to anything if you lay around all day watching cartoons. Shut up, Mom! Ben 10 is on! Fuck! Sorry, had a little PTSD flashback there for a second. Anyways, if you've spent any amount of time on the internet, you most likely know this guy, Alex Jones. And you've probably seen this clip.
You think I am like, shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay! Do you understand that? Serious crap!
Now, call me crazy, but I feel like that clip maybe deserves a little bit of context, and here it is.
Whoa, there it is!
The full context of the clip is him talking about a true story that the US Air Force was working on, and I'm not kidding you, a gay bomb, a quote-unquote non-lethal biochemical weapon that would ideally cause homosexual behavior, in humans. You can go research that story on your own. Just Google US Air Force gay bomb and gay bomb Ig Nobel Prize and you'll have a good laugh, I promise. Because when has chemical warfare ever not been fun? If I know anything about chemical warfare, it's that it's fun. But the part of the rant that I want to single out is the I don't like him putting chemicals in the water that turn the frickin' frogs gay part. This clip became famous and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the entry point to a lot of people for even becoming aware of Alex Jones's existence. It's been memed to hell and back and for a good reason. Because fucking funny. But when you look up what he's referring to, you can't help but do a little Now, the story I'm about to tell you is not about a gay bomb or the US government trying to make us all gay. Just wanted to get that out of the way, just wanted to clear the air, as it were. Rather, the story is about a specific event in recent history that, in my opinion, does a good job of illustrating the basics of a true conspiracy. So, if you don't mind, just bear with me for a little while and let me try to summarize for you the story of Dr. Tyrone Hayes, atrazine, and gay frogs.
Let's get right into
the list of deplatformed people.
Back in 1997, Dr. Tyrone Steal Your Girl Hayes, an American biologist and professor of integrative biology at the University of California, Berkeley, was hired by Syngenta, one of the largest agribusinesses in the world, to conduct experiments on their herbicide product atrazine, which is applied to more than half the corn in the US. Now, Dr. Neil Dothraki Tyson over here was already highly accomplished in his field, having published 20 papers on the endocrinology of amphibians, whatever the fuck that means, by the time he turned 31. During his work on a panel of experts conducting studies for Syngenta, he found unexpected toxicities in their herbicide atrazine. He reported them to the company and the panel of experts, but they were resistant to the findings. He wanted to repeat his work to validate the findings, but Syngenta refused funding further research into atrazine. He then pulled a Sigma male move. He resigned from the panel and obtained funding elsewhere to repeat his experiments. When leaving EcoRisk, which was the consulting firm that put together the panel of experts through which Hayes had joined the research, he said, "I fear that my reputation will be damaged if I continue my relationship and associated low productivity with Syngenta," which, by the way, back then was called Novartis. "It will appear to my colleagues that I have been part of a plan to bury important data." In 2002, Hayes published findings that he said replicated those he found while he was working on the Syngenta panel, that developing male African clawed frogs and leopard frogs exhibited female characteristics after exposure to atrazine. The findings were published in Nature and Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or PNAS. In 2007, Hayes was a co-author on a paper that detailed atrazine inducing mammary and prostate cancer in laboratory rodents and highlighted atrazine as a potential cause of reproductive cancers in humans. In 2007, Hayes presented results of his studies to the U.S. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences showing chemical castration in frogs. Individuals of both sexes had developed bisexual reproductive organs. In 2010, Hayes published research in PNAS describing laboratory work showing how exposure to atrazine turned male tadpoles into females with impaired fertility. Now, to be fair, the EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, has contested these findings and came to the conclusion that atrazine does not adversely affect amphibian development. But, to be even more fair, the EPA has long been accused of, and has admitted to, omitting information from documents and altering conclusions of studies. That could be an entire separate video, but I don't want this channel to be centered around depressing realities of human civilization. Suffice it to say, when you have people buying paper bags to save the environment and the agency that is supposed to protect the environment is very obviously corrupt, then you don't have to wonder too hard why so many people don't even give a shit about the environment anymore.
You don't know the thing.
Tangent over. Internal Syngenta documents from 2005, released by a class action lawsuit in 2014, show ways that Syngenta conspired to discredit Hayes, including attempting to retract his work and investigating his funding and private life. So, while Hayes was studying atrazine, Syngenta was studying him. Syngenta's PR team had drafted a list of goals. The first goal was to quote-unquote discredit Hayes. In a notebook, Syngenta's communications manager, Sherry Ford, wrote that the company could prevent citing of Dr. Hayes' data by revealing him as non-credible. Syngenta looked for ways to exploit Hayes' faults and problems, further adding, if Tyrone Hayes is involved in scandal, Enviros will drop him. In 2005, Sherry Ford created a long list of methods for discrediting him. Quote-unquote, have his work audited by third party, ask journals to retract, set trap to entice him to sue, investigate funding, investigate wife. Another set of ideas, discussed at several meetings, was to conduct systematic rebuttals of all TH appearances. One of the company's communications consultants said in an email that she wanted to obtain Hayes' calendar of speaking engagements so that Syngenta could start reaching out to the potential audiences with the error versus truth sheet, which would provide irrefutable evidence of his polluted messages. I hope you notice this is a very familiar tactic where, as long as you label something as a fact check, format it nicely, and say it with authority, it's credible, even though the information might not be. A little pro tip here from recent practices of people who wish to hide the truth: you should also use the word misinformation as much as possible, because anything that is labeled misinformation is automatically regarded as false, regardless of reality. And if that doesn't work, call them racist. The Syngenta PR team suggested that the company purchase Tyrone Hayes as a search word on the internet, so that anytime someone searches for Tyrone's material, the first thing they see is our material. According to the New Yorker article from 2014, at the time of the article being written, searching online for Tyrone Hayes brought up an advertisement that says, Tyrone Hayes not credible. That is no longer the case today, of course. In the summer of 2002, two scientists from the EPA visited Hayes' lab and reviewed his atrazine data. Thomas Steger, one of the scientists, told Hayes, your research can potentially affect the balance of risk versus benefit for one of the most controversial pesticides in the US. But an organization called the Center for Regulatory Effectiveness petitioned the EPA to ignore Hayes' findings. The petition said Hayes has killed and continues to kill thousands of frogs in unvalidated tests that have no proven value. The center argued that Hayes' studies violated the Data Quality Act passed in the year 2000, which requires that regulatory decisions rely on studies that meet high standards for quote-unquote quality, objectivity, utility, and integrity. What you might also want to know about the Center for Regulatory Effectiveness is that it's not a regulatory body. Rather, it's an industry-supported for-profit lobbying organization that describes itself as a regulatory watchdog, and it's run by an industry lobbyist and consultant for Syngenta, Jim Totsi, who proposed the language of the Data Quality Act to the congresswoman who sponsored it. This Jim Totsi fella, BT Dubs, was also a lobbyist for Philip Morris back in the 90s through his consulting firm, Multinational Business Services. Have you noticed that every shady company that does dirty work for big corporations has names like these? Like Jim Totsi had Multinational Business Services. Jeffrey Epstein had Intercontinental Assets Group and the Financial Trust Company. Hunter Biden has Seneca Global Advisors. Subprime mortgage lenders had New Century Financial Corporation, the American Freedom Mortgage, the American Home Mortgage Investment Corporation. But back to Jim Totsi, he is very savvy in all things regulation, and he's a big fan of the paralysis by analysis approach for pro-industry regulation. For example, Philip Morris back in the 90s were trying to battle the emerging scientific consensus that secondhand smoke was a danger to those who were overexposed to it. One of the big tobaccos in Totsi's strategies was to advocate for standards of quote-unquote good epidemiology that would have made it nearly impossible to conclude that secondhand smoke was dangerous. These standards were such that unless secondhand smoke was successfully shown to double the risk of cancer, it should be ignored. This, of course, would make it so that nearly any regulation of nearly every harmful toxin under the sun would become impossible. What I hope you're seeing from this is that this is a dirty, dirty game, and Fake Tan McGee over here has nothing to do with rigorous science and should have no say in government regulation. But he does. The battle between Dr. Hayes and Syngenta is ongoing, and I strongly encourage you to explore the story on your own, but in order for me to cover everything, this would have to be like a 2-hour video. To get a much better idea of what atrazine does to our environment, what it does to animals and humans, please go watch this TED Talk by Dr. Hayes. It's really interesting. And before we get back to the main idea of the video, just one last detail about Syngenta, a fun fact, if you will. Back in the day, when Hayes started studying atrazine, Syngenta was called Novartis. But Novartis later became Syngenta when the agrochemical and seed divisions of Novartis merged with the agrochemical and biotechnology research divisions of AstraZeneca. Yes, that AstraZeneca. Okay, I'm done with the story. Jesus, as I'm putting this together, it dawns on me that it would have made so much more sense to make 2 separate videos, one on conspiracies versus conspiracy theories, and another one on the gay frogs. But fuck, I'm just a dumb boy. I'm just a dumb little dumb boy. I'm 2 IQ points and 2 white parents away from Sean King. What do you want from me? So, the story of Syngenta versus Dr. Hayes and the health and safety of the American public is just one example of a very real conspiracy. And I specifically picked this one because the claim from Alex Jones was so hilariously out there, but it turned out to be at least somewhat true. There are many more examples like this, and I encourage you to explore. But while this story is true and supported by evidence, the way it was popularized by Alex illustrates one of the most important points in regards to conspiracy theories today. The worst enemy of the conspiracy theorist is the conspiracy theorist himself.
I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
If you had first learned about this story from the publicly available information, you would have come to the same old conclusion. Oh, a pesticide company is hiding information about their product being harmful to the environment and humans. Of course they are. That isn't surprising in the least. And only after learning this, you would see the Alex Jones take. You would probably laugh it off as a pretty wild and funny interpretation of reality, but at least you would have the knowledge of the actual situation. But if all you hear is chemicals in the water are turning the frickin' frogs gay, are you really gonna give that any credibility and investigate on your own? If you're anything like me, you probably won't. There are many more wild, crazy, never in a million years conspiracy theories. Anyone believing in these theories was once labeled a tinfoil hat-wearing loon. But then they turned out to be true. The Iraq War, for example, was not a war on terror.
How can you have a war on terror? What are you talking about? This doesn't even make sense. When's this going to end? When they've got the terror. Relax, it's all gone. We're moving on to horror next.
But a war on the unthinkable injustice of Western oil companies not having access to Iraq's nationalized oil reserves. For years, no one really believed that governments were spying on their citizens. Then this guy, who used to work for the NSA, did a big no-no by revealing that the government has more information about your private life than you do. The opioid epidemic, which resulted in countless deaths, decreased the life expectancy of the US population for the first time in 100 years since the First World War, and to this day continues to rack up fucking kills, was the result of aggressive and fraudulent marketing by pharmaceutical manufacturers. The people that did this and allowed this to happen, these are the same people and the same regulatory bodies who we trust to be responsible for our healthcare today. The same people who are handling the current pandemic. You will find more and more stories like this, all corroborated by facts, government disclosures, court cases, if you spend a little bit of time Googling. Or, DuckDuckGoing, because let's be honest, Google's preferential treatment of search results is another open secret we all seem to be completely okay with.
Java source file structure, very, very important, sir.
At the base of every conspiracy, every real, actual conspiracy, is a mixture of the same common motivations. These are fundamentally human things, and they're in no way exclusive to the rich and powerful. And the way I have it figured is that it boils down to 4 basic components. Someone else will figure out a better way of putting it, I'm sure. I'm just a dumb boy, and this is my hot take. And these are the components: lies, trust, greed, and incompetence. It all starts with a lie. We all lie to some extent. Outright lies, lies of omission. At an everyday level, our lies still have far-reaching consequences, but these consequences aren't always easy to notice in the moment. We like to think that our sweet little lies are harmless and not at all the same as the lies of politicians or CEOs of tech giants covering up data mining, but the point is that they're motivated by the same things, just on a smaller scale. You, for example, lie on a resume, betraying your employer's trust to get more money. If the employer hires you without double checking, then their incompetence is at least partially responsible too. A company lies to the public about the safety of their products, betraying the public's trust to turn a profit. If the regulatory body doesn't catch on to this or ignores it, then their incompetence or corruption is also responsible. Of course, actual conspiracies are more nuanced than boiling it down to a headline. Sometimes, pesticide company makes millions from killing the environment will be true, but leave out the reality of how it happened. In the gay frog story, we know that the company tried to discredit the scientists they hired to test their pesticide. But we don't know, and in all likelihood never will know, who specifically made the decision to discredit Hayes and cover up the facts. Was it one person's decision? Was there an internal committee? Did the CEO know? Is this an isolated incident or an indication of the company's corruption? Did they pay off any regulatory body officials? How objective and diligent are the regulatory bodies? Were any politicians involved? You can get deep in the weeds trying to figure this shit out. But what helps me is to remember that these things happen all the time. And they happen not because of some cosmic evil or satanic forces, but just regular, everyday, basic bitch human behavior.
Yeah, I was a bartender. Now I own a boat.
You own a boat?
Object to the test!
Good.
Do you feel it?
No.
Far be it for me to say what the fix for this is. I'm just a dumbass with a YouTube channel, but here are some ideas that I think might help. Pay politicians way the fuck more. Pay them enough to decrease or remove the incentive to take bribes and get themselves in compromising circumstances. I am sure we can find a little spare change somewhere in the couch cushions, or maybe take a quick break from funding war crimes in the oil deserts and taxing the shit out of everyone to fund said war crimes. Get money and advertising out of the news media. The sensationalization of the media has led news outlets away from reporting facts to reporting the things that will get the most clicks, thus making them more money through advertising. And if the media is for profit, then the information we get is often to the benefit of the sponsors, not the education of the public.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Make it illegal for companies to fund the very regulatory bodies which are meant to regulate them. It's public knowledge, for example, that about 45% of the FDA's budget comes from the companies it's supposed to regulate. Fun fact, for FDA's work on human drugs, that number is 65%, not 45%. When the company you're supposed to police is also paying your salary, a question emerges. How objective are you really? Where do your interests lie? In protecting the health and safety of the public, or keeping the money machine going? This next one is really out there and extra unrealistic, but as long as we're daydreaming, somehow, God knows how, get rid of the year-on-year growth model for companies. Making more money, of course it makes sense. That's what companies do, but if every year, no matter how much you made last year or the year before that, you now have to make more money and keep growing, there's only so much growth you can achieve in a legal and ethical way. The real banality of evil here, pardon the obvious reference, is that most likely a lot of these crimes are committed by people either doing their jobs or trying to keep their jobs, without thinking too much about what rippling effects their actions may have. If you want to get real kumbaya with this shit, here's one. I think we all need to look at ourselves first. What about our biases? How and why have we been wrong in the past? How and why have we lied and deceived? If the source of misinformation is everyday basic bitch human behavior and we are still not in control of these flaws in ourselves, we can't help anyone. We can only make things worse. There is no benefit in replacing the existing issue with a slightly different variety of the same piss-flavored Kool-Aid. And if we, as individuals, are a mess of lying for the sake of advancement and betraying the trust of others, then we are no better than the real criminals. We just have less money, power, and reach. And lastly, I think it might be a good idea for us to not ridicule or shut down people who talk about conspiracies and ask questions. Yes, some of them will be insufferable. Yes, we know a good half of it, at least, makes zero sense. But maybe respectful disagreement is more appropriate than ridicule. Talk to the people around you and have compassion for them. Maybe the uncle who keeps telling you that the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor has reserves, and that tech billionaires have way too much influence over public health decisions and the flow of information, is not trying to indoctrinate you to get you to put on a funky hat and wear your hoodie behind your ears and storm the Capitol. He's afraid and concerned. He doesn't trust the people that are supposed to protect and represent him, you, me. Maybe that fear is throwing him off and making it harder for him to find joy in life. And while he is probably wrong about some of the stuff he believes, he's probably more right about more of this stuff than you imagine. And that should scare you. If you like this video, you'll like this next one too. Go ahead, watch it, you greedy little bitch. Okay, bye!